like to welcome all of you to this presentation of our Faith for Today series for 2020. It has been a most interesting year trying to present to you all the programs that we had originally scheduled. And so today I am pleased that Kim Tillotson Fleming has agreed to be our speaker and talk about her mission trips that she has made. And in order for Kim to come to our church, she was contacted by one of our active members, Chuck Vogel. And so at this time, I'm going to have Chuck Vogel introduce Kim, and then she will go directly into her presentation.
Thank you, John. I am delighted today to welcome Kim Tillotson Fleming as our speaker in this Faith for Today series. Kim is chair of the board and chief executive officer of Heffron Tillotson, a financial analysis and help company here in Pittsburgh, one of the largest financial institutions in the Pittsburgh area, actually. Perhaps you've seen Kim's smiling face on TV with ads for Heffron Tillotson. Kim is married, has 2 adult children. She's been very active in the business community, the community itself, and certainly with her church. She has a long list of prestigious awards that she's won, both locally and statewide, many more than I can take the time to read here. But there is one award that the company has gotten, it really is for Kim, that I would like to mention, and that is the Best Places to Work Award. Her company has been granted that award both locally and statewide a number of times. And I think that's a tribute to Kim for her ability as a great leader and manager. An important part of Kim's life is her church. She's a deacon in the Highland Presbyterian Church in the North Hills. She's been active in that church and involved in many of the activities there. She has a special interest in mission and mission trips. She's made trips outside the country. I think we'll hear about that today. She's actually organized one of those trips. And also she's worked very much with the youth of the church and has been on many work missions each year with them. So it's a great honor for us to have Kim for us today. And I'm pleased to present to you Kim Tillotson Fleming. Kim?
Hey, thank you, Chuck, and thank you, John. John was reminding me that I had spoken at Mount Lebanon a number of years ago, and I think at that time I spoke about stewardship, which is another subject that I really enjoy talking about. But today I'd like to talk about, I titled this, Getting Back More Than You Give, Discovering the Joy in Giving. And especially during this time when we're limited on our ability to travel and to do international mission, it's a time where this means a lot, and probably many of us that really enjoy it are feeling a real desire to get back out and do something because there is so much need around. I was thinking about what I've learned about the importance of giving, and just to put scripture around it, Peter 4:10 says, "Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace." And now I have to put my glasses on, in its various forms. And I think that's really an appropriate scripture for the idea of being involved in mission and in giving back. And I think what I've learned about taking these trips and doing mission is that it's transformative, it's contagious, and it's also addictive. And so a few years ago, in 2017, when I hadn't been able to go on an international trip for a while, I was invited to go on a trip to Malawi, and I couldn't join that trip. So I decided to look into a trip on my own and found Habitat for Humanity had a trip there, and I signed up, and that led into a couple other trips that we did for our company. But if I could ask Joanne to move the slide, or to put the slides up, and then we'll go to the first slide. I think the words on this slide, and it's a slide with the pictures. And this slide says, "We make a living by what we get. We make a life by what we give." This picture was taken last year on our company trip to Guatemala. We did a Habitat for Humanity trip to Guatemala. And if you look at the smiling faces of these little girls, there's no way you can be around people on these trips and not feel the rewards of being out there and helping. If we look at the next slide, my advice would be for anyone, you can get involved. And getting involved doesn't always mean doing the mission on your own, but you can get involved by helping support it financially. You can get involved by supporting it with your prayers. You can get involved just by going out. Usually there's fundraising that needs to be done, and helping to do the fundraising by giving encouragement and support. There's so many ways to get involved, but for me personally, I work in the financial field, and there are a lot of intangibles in the financial field, but getting out and actually doing hands-on work like this has so many rewards, and it's different than what we do day to day. So these are just a few places, both locally and internationally, that we've been involved. The one picture that or actually two pictures that I might comment on the most in this one is on the bottom left-hand side. This is a picture of one of the work camps with our youth group from church. And when we got to this site, the kids had to go up on the roof of the house in order to rebuild a farmhouse roof, and they didn't want to get up on the roof. By the end of the week, they couldn't get off the roof. Nobody wanted to get off the roof. They had learned new skills. They were comfortable. The transformative nature of that, and then the warmth of the family that we were doing this work for, really made an impact on these kids. On the right-hand side on the bottom, when you get involved in any kind of mission work, this is one of our work colleagues, Neil Alexander, in the middle, who had ALS. And our company rallied around Neil through so many different fundraisers in so many ways that it truly was transformative in a lot of our people's lives to watch him and how he coped with a terrible disease, and then to have the ability to actually make a difference, which has still continued to carry on. If we look at the next slide, for our company, we've tried to build a culture where people have opportunities to get out and give back, and we feel like it makes people better people. So years ago, when we were going through one of the rough times in the markets, we had to cut back on certain things with the company, but we said, you know, there are so many needs in the community. What could we do that would make a difference? And so we started to work with the food bank, and that tradition has continued through today. It's open to anyone in the company to come out, work at the food bank. We buy the food, and then we bring everyone in to do the packing and to box it up and have it ready to go out and ship for those in need. And it's included the kids and the families that are part of Heffron Tillotson. And I think for them, you know, that's also a great opportunity early on to introduce them to the whole concept of giving and to see the rewards of that giving. If we look at the next page, you know, this also has provided opportunities for people in our company to take on leadership roles. So we have one person who has been really in charge of the Rebuild Together Pittsburgh initiative. And that's going out to help work on homes of people that have that are older usually, that have a lot of needs in their house for things to be rebuilt. And these are just a few of the slides that you can see from that. I'm going to focus most of my comments, though, on the international mission trips. So if we turn to the next slide, I had the opportunity back in 2003 to go on a Presbyterian disaster assistance trip to Malawi. And this was in a time when Malawi, which is a country in Africa, it's one of the poorest countries in the world, was having a real issue with famine. And I love this picture because you see the connection in the eyes of the two looking at each other. The one on the left was one of our hosts in Malawi. The one on the right was one of the team members that went on this trip. And there were 13 of us that went on the trip. None of us knew each other. We all met up in Georgia, flew over to Africa together, and had the opportunity to distribute food and medical supplies and other items to people in Malawi where they were basically running out of food. And if we look at the next slide, the woman on the right-hand side was a woman named Joyce. And Joyce was one of those people that has a heart that just sees into you, and she could see the need in the kids. She would take us aside and show us the children who, for the most part, looked healthy. And people in Malawi, even in the midst of their famine crisis, were some of the most joyful people I've ever met. You know, when we would pull into a site, they would come up singing and dancing and greeting us. And for the most part, they look healthy. But Joyce would take us and show us the children and show us their hair and show us things that we might not have seen, the stomachs that were bloated. And we had the opportunity to hear from the people directly about just how bad things were there. And some of the most moving moments were when they said, if it hadn't been for you, if it weren't for the support you're giving us, we were throwing people into ditches. They were dying, and we were having to bury them. And just the love and the care that came back from the people in Malawi was truly transformative. It just made you realize that these are people that we're all connected, and that we could actually make a difference in their lives. And if you look on the next slide, I love this slide because one of the places that we were serving was actually at a school. And they said, we want to bring the kids to school to get their food because they aren't getting the education they need, and they can't sit in school with empty stomachs. They can't pay attention if they have empty stomachs. So we were able to go to feed the children, and then they were able to attend classes afterwards and have a lot more comfort. I think that trip was the beginning of what I would call the contagious part of getting involved in mission, where once you've done it, you just want to go back and make a difference again. So I had another opportunity, if we look at the next slide, to go back to Africa. And we were in South Africa this time, and this was with a small church in the Pittsburgh area that had formed a mission called Foursquare Ministry. And they would go out and they would build churches and they'd build preschools. So they had a good model that had been going on for a number of years. You can see in the picture, this was the preschool that we built, and this was when it was almost done. So when we got there, the foundation was there, but none of the preschool was built. So we were able in a week's time, with about 12 people again, to build this entire facility. And you can see some of the people up on the top waving at us. And if you look on the next page, when we got to the site again, the people from the community would come and they'd work side by side with you. The women were there with us on the ground. The men were teaching us how to do the bricklaying. We were not skilled workers, but it's amazing what you can learn in a week's time. And then the children who came, and these are children that some of them would be using the preschool after we left, were ones that you just want to take home because they're so warm, so friendly, and so grateful. And I really think when you're doing this kind of mission, you get more out of it than you ever put into it. And I think that's one of the lessons that you learn when you do this kind of work. I had the bug again in 2017 to go overseas, and in between these times, had many opportunities to do work locally. So I have worked with our youth group for a long time, went on mission trips with them and work camps with them for many years. And we went all around the United States, but never an international mission. But after I went back to Malawi in 2017 on my first Habitat trip, and I don't have pictures of that in this slide deck, but the trip in 2017 was one where I signed up, and there were 23 of us from all around the country, and it was literally every age and every background. There were not many similarities to us, except that it was just a group of people that had hearts that were unbelievable. And so you had a grandfather who took his grandson, that was his graduation gift. There was an aunt there who took her niece as a graduation gift. There was a father-son team. We had a woman who was a principal in Harlem, and she was just a young woman in her late 20s, and just a real mix of people. And I'd say all of us were pretty anonymous. Once we got there, we had a mission to do. We built 3 houses in the course of a week. Habitat was terrific, and having the materials there, and we did debriefings every night. And these trips really tug at your heart, because for those of us who are in the United States who have all the comforts of home, to go to another country where they don't have running water, where they don't have shelter, where they hardly have food. When I was in Malawi in 2017, I don't remember seeing them ever eating on the sites except for food that we would be able to offer them. And you look at people that have so little, and yet the joy that they radiate and the greetings that we got and the love that we felt was something that's just hard to describe. So as I said in the beginning, it's something that's transformative and it's contagious and it is addictive. So after the trip in 2017, something just reached my heart that said, this would be something that would be so great for people from our company to do together, and the bonds that people would feel, and just the opportunity to have a different perspective by doing something like this. I really didn't know what kind of response we'd have, but what we did was we said, anyone can go on the trip, and financial, it won't be something that anyone would be kept from doing financially. So we were able to get some donors to help support the trip. We had about 23 people that went in 2018 to Guatemala. It was another Habitat trip. And this is the team that went, and we're actually all around in the front of us. This is a machine that we use to make bricks. And then the bricks were used for some of the home building that was going on in Guatemala. And it really was transformative for people that went on that trip. And it was something that when we came back, people said, we need to make this something we do again. So we went again in 2019. But if you turn to the next page, the facts on Guatemala, Guatemala is another extremely poor country. 2/3 of the population lives on less than $2 a day. It's among the 10 countries most vulnerable to natural disasters and the effects of climate change. And because of the poor nutrition, 46.5%, almost 50% of children under the age of 5 are stunted. I'm 5 feet tall, and I was taller than most of the grown women that I was with in Guatemala. And the level of poverty that we saw, again, it mirrors in many ways what we saw in Malawi. And the projects we did were really basic projects. So if we look on the next page, the sanitary latrine project, 46% of Guatemalans use inadequate latrine or no services at all. So we were, in some cases, removing or rebuilding latrine systems. These weren't latrines that we're used to in the United States. These were just basically shelters that had a toilet, and then the toilet had a very deep well, but there wasn't really a well. It just had a deep hole underneath it, but there was actually a seat in there, and it was so much better. And then we had ventilation that we put in. The difference that made for people that were in many cases sharing these among a neighborhood or a community was incredible. So we did the latrines, and then the other project we worked on was the Smokeless stove project. And because they use wood for most of their stoves, this causes a lot of respiratory issues for people in Guatemala. So by having the Smokeless stove, it uses much less wood. It has an outlet so the smoke isn't coming into their lungs as much. It actually goes out of the house. And you can see a little bit on the left-hand side. And actually, if we turn to the next page, you'll see some of the work that was going on while we were doing the project. But on the very bottom left, this is the stove after we had built the new stoves. And it was so much better than the old ones. And you can see the latrine on the right-hand side on the bottom, that was one of the finished latrines with a nice wood structure around it. And the toilet was inside there. And you can see in the picture on the bottom in the middle, the kind of relationships that we had with the people in Guatemala. And it's certainly one of the reasons that people wanted to go back. I think one of the things that is special about Habitat is that you're actually working side by side with people that will benefit from the services. And they call that sweat equity. So it's not just going and doing work, but it's actually working side by side with people who are going to benefit from the work that's done. And then the relationships that are built when you're working side by side are lasting. And I know there are many Facebook friends with people back to Guatemala from not only the Habitat people we worked with, but also the people that we were able to build for. One of the other benefits of these trips is it is a cultural experience. And I have to say the food not in Malawi is pretty awful. Food is pretty much the same every day, but in Guatemala, the food was fabulous. And so we were well cared for, but yeah, it's different. It gets you out of the box, and it's just one of the most rewarding experiences that I can imagine. So we took another trip after 2018. There was so much enthusiasm for this and a connection to Guatemala that we went back in 2019. So on the next page, we have the team that went in 2019. And 6 of the people returned from the first year. I guess we had about 16 or 17 that were new to the experience, but many of them had connections to the people that had already gone. And I think for those that were going the second time, you always wonder if it will be as good as the first time. And I'll read to you some of, I'll call them the testimonies of people and what people took away from these trips in just a minute. If we look on the final slide, this slide is showing a number of the members of our team in front of the final project that we were doing. This was going to be a house for the people that we were building it for, and you see a few of the children that will be living in that house. And this was actually going to be a really nice home for people that had really subpar conditions. So again, I would say that the things that I've taken away are that these trips, they are transformative. Once you've gone on them, they're contagious because people say, couldn't stop talking about it. I couldn't stop thinking about it. And then they are addictive because people that go on these trips or people that do this kind of work, I think for the most part find you feel like you can't live without it. You really want to get out. It doesn't feel like life is full without it. So I thought I would conclude my comments by just sharing a few of the comments that people made that had been on the trips to Guatemala the last few years. The first says, "I've never felt so humbled, gracious, full-hearted, sympathetic, purposeful, inspired, all at the same time than I have on this trip. I recall you saying that these trips ground you. This makes complete sense to me now, as I felt the same grounded feeling as well. I also will remember our Habitat leader's plea: don't become neutral in situations of injustice." Someone else wrote, "The word I picked to write on the lava charred stick," which was a stick that we had after we did a hike on the volcano, and everybody wrote a word that described their trip. This person says, "The word I picked was whole. I felt this word fit how I was feeling in so many ways. It's easy to get caught up in the busyness of our lives, so being able to take a break and witness how deep the human needs are in other countries really allows you to step back to have a whole perspective and reflect on what is truly important. The families we friended had a missing piece, and the homes we helped build filled that and gave them the safety, comfort, and health they need to be whole." One other person wrote, "It was an opportunity for me to give back to the world, to leave the country for the first time and experience a very different lifestyle. I felt humbled among those families we helped, and I left with a desire to live life more simply." And then one of the people who had been on the trip before said, "Having such an amazing experience last year, I was worried this trip may not be as impactful. However, this trip exceeded all my expectations and really reinforced my commitment to this type of volunteerism." So I think I would conclude by saying, I hope that by sharing some of the experiences that I personally have felt and some of the experiences that others on our trip felt, that it might give people that are watching this the enthusiasm to try doing mission. I would say it doesn't really matter if it's local or if it's international. They both have the same, I think they both have the same feeling that they are transformative. They change your perspective. They are contagious. And if you do it, and if you feel that it's helped you, then I say spread the word, because you'll change someone else's life. And then hopefully you'll find that it's addictive and it's something that you'll want to repeat. And so as they say in Peter 4:10, each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. So thank you for letting me participate in Faith for Today. And I guess I'll turn it back, John or Chuck, to you.
Kim, thank you very much for that most inspiring talk. Our church has been involved in many mission projects, and this year our youth were to go to Virginia, as they have for many times before, but because of COVID, they were unable to go. So I really appreciate your presentation today, because it gave us a taste of missions that were pre-COVID, and reminded us that once this is over, we can begin and be involved in mission trips again. So thank you so much for your words and your pictures and your witness.
Yeah.
Joanne, I'd also like to thank you. Joanne Tissue was the technician here, who is the executive assistant for Kim, and helped provide the technology so that you could see the pictures that we had. And of course, to Chuck, thank you, Chuck, for contacting Kim and having her speak to us today on our this 66th year of our Faith for Today. You were a great part of it, and I want to thank all of you. God bless everybody. So long.
Thank you.